Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Who dares awaken me from my slumber? The Blonde and Booze Paranormal Podcast. Yes, this must mean we are all teaming up for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. We do have some Dogman business to attend to, but I am feeling a tad under the weather. Please allow me to feed. Much better. Now that I am fully revamped and I can feel my powers oozing through my veins as my shackles have been released, it is now time for the Blonde and Booze Paranormal Podcast and myself to take a walk into the darkness.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. We have two amazing hosts tonight, yes, two, and they have a podcast of their own. The Blonde and Booze have joined us. How are we doing tonight?
I'm good.
I'm good too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for actually taking time. I know you are both so packed up and always churning out your own content, but it is great to finally sit down and get a second to pick your mind and hear some of your thoughts on the Dogman. So I'm going to hand the mic over to both of you, and I would like to hear your thoughts or anything new you've been up to, and just tell the audience who both you are and what we do.
All right, we're Blondes and Booze Paranormal Podcast, and started back during the COVID era, and just like to talk about weird stuff. So here we are.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it all started when her and I were sitting out on her back porch there at her house, and she asked me, what do you think about Dogman? And I think that's when it all began, really.
I would agree. Yeah. Because not very many people, you mentioned Dogman, and people who don't know what it is or are non-believers, they'll be like, what are you even talking about? And she knew.
I did. And and I guess that's just where all the weirdness started, with the cryptid side, because we were paranormal and had been paranormal our whole lives. So this was kind of a change in direction of what we were normally used to. And we're still learning and still researching all the time.
That is super cool stuff. No, both of you are excellent researchers, and I do encourage my audience to check out the podcast that I will be throwing up links for, because Blonde and Booze is always churning out content, and I do encourage everyone to pop over there and subscribe and check that out. And that's super cool that both of you know each other outside of your podcast, because a lot of the cool people I've met, I've actually never really had a chance to per se sit down face to face. I mean, I've been able to talk, text, and FaceTime, etc. But that's cool. Both you roll back to the old school right there.
Yep, that's it. We were friends before the podcast.
Excellent. That's cool. Well, that definitely makes for even better content when you know really who you're teaming up with. So this is excellent. Have both of you been on any sort of interesting expeditions lately? I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I caught some pretty creepy clips of, I think it was both of you, correct, in the LBL in a cemetery in the middle of nowhere.
That was Brandy. Well, we were both over there, but I think that night it was just Brandy, and she recorded some pretty cool stuff over there.
Yeah, it was just a weird church out in the middle of nowhere in the LBL with no houses around. There's nothing out there, but yet there's this church with manicured grounds, and the graveyard was taken care of. The church itself was nice and painted and just taken care of on the inside. So it was just kind of a weird church to find in the middle of nowhere.
I agree with that for sure. From your video, as you stated, yeah, it looked like it was well kept, but you were in the middle of nowhere. So that's definitely a very nightmare type fuel because obviously someone or something is taking care of this area. So that's definitely intriguing. Have both of you ever personally had any sort of experiences with anything paranormal or Dogman based, or what really, I guess, intrigued you to want to dive more into this topic?
For me, Dogman has always intrigued me, just the thought of it. I've always liked scary stuff. And to me, Dogman is a scary being. And so I've always, I've been into learning more and knowing more, wanting to know more, all I can, educate myself and others about it. And but as far as having a Dogman encounter, no, I have never.
And I guess for me, because I really, I didn't know the term dogman really until later, because me growing up and being older, it was always a werewolf or a wolf man. It was never a dogman. So the research continues. Even though I haven't had an encounter, I would still like to know if these are one and the same, or if they're different, or what are we actually dealing with? Because I mean, the evidence is out there somewhere. It just needs to be found.
I would agree.
100% right there. That was extremely well stated by both of you. And yes, I believe the term Dogman kind of started really, I guess, getting steam when Linda Godfrey was really diving into her research, and she happened to actually say herself that she wished she didn't use that terminology, that maybe she had used Wolfman or something along the lines. But yes, exactly. So as you had stated, it's been referred to as this being way before the term Dogman. So I guess I kind of always get a chuckle when individuals say, hey, there's no reporting or anything of the term of the Dogman except around this date. And that's such false information because it's been around way before the term Dogman came out. It's just a terminology right there.
Right. Yeah, she was Linda Godfrey, the work that she's done is just, it's left quite an impact on the whole cryptid community as a whole too. I mean, I didn't know her personally, but I know people who did. And she was just a wealth of information, and, it's a shame that she's passed already.
Yeah, because I would have really liked to have met her, just to pick her brain. Unfortunately, I'll just have to, keep the books and just keep reading her stuff and over and until something clicks.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It is definitely sad. Rest in peace, Miss Godfrey. But what she did and what you both just stated, how we can all pay her homage is just make sure her research doesn't ever go away, that we just continue to build off it. And it is super cool to just see the evolution of it, because when she was working on all her books around that time frame, that was the go-to. That was like the holy grail for researchers to figure out what was going on with Dogman, is to carry her books around and just everything she was doing. So yeah, without her, I'm not even really sure if we'd be having this conversation. I mean, obviously it probably would have picked up at some point, but yeah, without Linda, there really isn't this conversation in general in my eyes. So it is really cool and a great way to pay homage to her and just continue what we're doing. How do you both feel in general about what potentially a dogman is, or do you think a lot of people maybe are misidentifying things on top of seeing real things, or how do we stand on that?
I would personally, I mean, obviously we're here because we really don't know what it is, So as far as my beliefs, I'm definitely not in the flesh and blood category. However, if you compare it something to like, another type of cryptid creature, like Bigfoot, the Bigfoot that Brandy and I saw, it was flesh and blood. There was nothing, no orbs or nothing weird along that side of it. So, can Dogmen be kind of both? Maybe, yes. I really, honestly, I have no idea what they are. I mean, I hear a lot of people's, beliefs, what they believe they are. I'm just not sure where I stand on that yet. I've never witnessed one or encountered one, so I just don't know yet.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to determine exactly what it is. I mean, like Krista said, there's so many theories out there of what these things are. A lot of people that we've heard reports from, it would seem a flesh and blood type encounter. There weren't any, supernatural things about it. That it was just looked like some type of animal, just not the ones that we're used to seeing, of course. And then, we have the theories out there that they were engineered and all this. And, I just don't know where to stand on it. I don't, like I said, me being older, I mean, there's always been the stories of the werewolves and the wolf man. And
I feel like, and as far as, like you made the mention of misidentified, other things, and it could be because, because there are so many, like with the Dogman chart, there are so many different variations of it. Some of them, maybe they're actually a gugway or, or something like that along those lines that people see, and it's the closest thing they can think of, because people have heard more, I think, of a Dogman than a gugway, or you know what I'm saying?
yeah, we hear that, that they can be found a lot of times around cemeteries and things like that. And, that the origins go back to Anubis. And, there's even, you could even like attach it to hellhounds if you would like to, because that's where they would hang out. That sort of thing. I mean, it's really hard to tell where these things originated from. And I guess we just have a lot of questions that we would like answered. I guess. I mean, that's what we're really doing all the research for.
Agree. Yep.
Very well stated by both of you again, and I couldn't agree more with that. And I know here at the North American Dogman Project, we do break it down into three different sectors: potentially extraterrestrial, potentially paranormal, and potentially physical. Because throughout the reports, we definitely have, I would say in my recollection, at least 50% are something that solidifies a physical being, but then we also have a ton that solidifies something was not potentially physical, because as far as I know, when you shine a flashlight on something that's physical, it doesn't go through it, meaning it was more of an apparition, not necessarily something physical. And then we do have reports potentially in the direction of it being extraterrestrial based. And my next statement, I would like to get both of your thoughts potentially on, because we've been working hardcore on a theory that we believe cave hyenas, as well as cave bears, dire wolves, and also the Dinopithecus, which was a giant baboon, as well as current baboons that live. We believe a lot of these reportings, when people are seeing baboon type dogmen or gugway and hyena based type dogmen, that they are either seeing relatives or actual those beings, meaning because in the 1890s with the ringdocus that was shot, it looks to be dire wolfish or maybe a hyena. And also recently our science team and our environmentalists But speaking about how there's been some cattle mutilations where the teeth that fit in perfectly were dire wolves, and all those animals I just named only went potentially extinct around 10,000 to 11,000 years ago, is what the scientific range is for that. And they all lived in the areas that these people are seeing strange encounters as well. And they also all used cave systems and those areas just like any other animal. And cave bears spent around 90% of their time in the caves, meaning they would come out and feed, yet they just go back into these caves and roam around and live in there. And we all know that everyone's going missing around cave systems. We have a ton of strange prints that, to the untrained eye, a bear print looks a ton like a hyena, and also the back print of a baboon looks very bear-like as well. And in a ton of these reports, people say they're bipedal and quadrupedal, which is something a baboon is very much like. And they have bent back legs that look canine-ish, and they also have huge manes and large canine teeth. And now they have hands where, if again someone's getting a quick glimpse of or an encounter, say a child is screaming, "Hey, mommy, a monster's looking in my window." Well, a baboon can look very honestly werewolfish, and we do get reports of the baboons. But then now, the paranormal aspect, I think a lot of times I don't really know much about paranormal, and this is just my thought, and I would definitely love to hear yours on this. If people are seeing, say, in the cemeteries or maybe in their room, say, like nightmares, do you think the manifestations of, say, their negative thoughts or negative energy, everything knows, and we all know werewolves are scary, right? So if demons and ghosts are out there popping around, it would be logical for them to take on the form of something that would terrify us, correct?
I would, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Last year, Brandy and I were at an event and we had a guy show us a picture of what looked like a dog man coming through his wall. And I found that interesting because, that just goes back to, we don't know what it is. And Brandy, you also saw that picture. And, I'm not a big one for pictures, but I got to tell you, that picture looked pretty convincing.
Yeah, what you were saying. Um, I'm wondering, are these more of mutations that we're dealing with today, or are these hybrids? When you're talking about, the baboon looking type things. I mean, what do you think that we're really dealing with here?
Well, first off, I did want to respond to both what you and Krista were saying about the image coming through the wall. That's nightmare fuel, but I totally agree. It's really hard, especially now with technology, and I know how it is. I'm a graphics designer. I know what everyone can do with images. If I really wanted to create images that look old school, etc., it's not hard with filters. And now we all know the majority of these images that are presented to us are, even for Dogman, blur squashes, blur Dogman, whatever, like we can use the terminology. It's usually the type of image. And unfortunately, when we install fear into ourselves, it's a natural energy that is meant for our survival. Okay. So, way back in the past, when we were dealing with large predators or other tribes that might have been not very kind to us. Yes, bumps in the night to wake you up and having the fear of seeing a shadow in the woods. Yes, that probably was a large tiger potentially coming to get us. That's why it's installed into us. But now, fast forward, we definitely can trick ourselves, I think, if we work ourselves all up and we go out into the forest. There are so many times where shadows and such definitely depict, it's a log, but it could look like a dog man. So that is definitely my response to both of yours with that, because I agree. But now, to answer Brandy's question, I think there's a different layer now, because unfortunately, since World War II, we know Stalin and the Russians were trying to make a super army where they were trying to do messed up stuff by putting ape DNA in with women. And well, it doesn't work like that. They're still closely related to us, but yes, you can't make an army of ape humans like that because it doesn't work like that. So they failed. But yet now, fast forward to the Nazis and stuff, they were doing all kinds of crazy things, like just disturbing stuff, okay? Taking off body parts, putting them onto other animals and such, including heads, and they were still living. I don't know how far that, when they would do that with dogs and such. But yet now you have the case of the U.S. infantry unit during World War II that went into Celi Nexus Rothis, that German village where they found the town hall, and the lower levels were flooded. And down there, there's 3 divers that went down. 2 of them never came back. They just had their tethers. The 3rd guy came back, was mortified. He said he saw, because it was all flooded, but there was occult symbols everywhere, which we know Hitler and Henrik Heinler and all those guys were into the occult. And also this diver explained in all these rooms there were plentiful signs of human mutilation and experiments. And he also said in one room there were people chained to a chair, or what looked like people that had dog heads, wolf's head, and even a goat head put on top of them. And he couldn't tell if they were still trying to free themselves or if it was the current from the water down there. Yet after that, he basically was dismissed, and we handed over this area to the British, who then flattened it. So we know, yes, the Nazis and others, and this is like what, 1940s, 50s? Okay, and if they're doing that stuff back then, fast forward now to what's going on. Yeah, unfortunately, I do believe that the alphabet boys, or however people would like to refer to it, of course, if they were practicing this type of disturbing behavior back then, why would we not be now? And there are ways where, as I just said, I guess in theory, if you were to take the head off a human being and somehow keep their heart going enough where you put the dog on there, I don't know how many times you would need to try that until something potentially happened. But I do know no matter how hard they tried, you couldn't mate a dog and a human together, etc. So I think maybe with some of the disturbing stuff, if you were putting on different body parts, yeah, you might have some sort of success with that. But the bottom line with evolution, as far as I know, you can't say take a frog and mate it with a fox and create a frog fox. But you could take like they're doing, a woolly mammoth, and take the embryo and put it into an elephant and have it grow, because they're still from the same genetic tree. I don't know if I answered your question, because I am definitely not an expert whatsoever on any of this. This is just from what I've gathered from speaking to my science team and also doing my own research.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about gene splicing to even make an educated guess.
Me either. I know nothing about it. I do know it's not, it's not possible for a man and a dog, to, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just not physically possible. So, I think, people have seen these creatures, and then that's what they call it, because sometimes they're on 2 feet, they do have the dog looking head sometimes. So what else would they call it, other than a dog man?
Sure.
But, I don't think it's literal in the sense that it is half dog, half man.
Yes, I feel like that falls more into the lycanthropy aspect of a curse, meaning like the Rougarou and such, which there's definitely a big distinction in my eyes between skinwalkers, the werewolves, and the dogman, meaning the dogman in my eyes, as well as some others I work with, doesn't take on the form of a human, meaning it can't go back and forth, whereas a skinwalker and a wendigo, if you read into the Navajo legend as well as other Native American legends and stories about that, almost all the translations of the meaning of skinwalker tends to be being on all fours, or he or she that walks on all fours, meaning you take the pelt of the animal. So yes, you would be the grizzly bear, yet you're not turning into a raging werewolf grizzly bear, meaning this isn't like a full moon, okay, where that came out. That's more of the kind of the curse of maybe the werewolf girl, Isabella Clarke, where she went to Europe and then came back and supposedly had hair in places she shouldn't have and would act strange on the full moon. So yeah, you have that aspect. But when it comes to the dogman, I personally, like I said, don't think the dogman can just take on the form of you and I. It stays in this form that it's in. And again, like we said with the terminology, hyenas aren't canine, baboons aren't canine, the dire wolf is not related to any modern day canines, bears aren't canines, yet they all look canine-ish, meaning from a glimpse to especially someone with an untrained eye, yes, it would look like a canine. So if someone was like, hey, I saw a hyena dog man, well, hyenas aren't dogs, they're related to mongoose and civets. Which is strange though too. They dig at least 7 feet deep burrows. Yet a lot of people don't realize hyena packs range from like 30 up to 130 plus, some of the largest ones, and they stay within their family groups. So scientists haven't really had a chance to get into a bunch of hyena dens to see how deep they go, but the ones that they have been able to study, they go at least 7 feet deep. And all across the country, people have been seeing strange burrows and dens everywhere, dug into the side of riverbeds, out in the forest. And it's just interesting because that's just behavior of hyenas, but also coyotes and foxes do this. But again, like I said, mongoose and civets and weasels really love digging burrows and spending time underneath the ground. So I think there's a mixture as to what's going on. I do think people are seeing paranormal stuff. I do think they are seeing maybe some sort of sick experimentation going on. And I also think that we do have either people's spotted hyenas that they have decided to let go or that were pets. And the reason I say that stuff is like with the Beast of Gévaudan, that really legendary case over in France. Well, people in the area, like the peasants and villagers, said that they were seeing a striped hyena. The problem with striped hyenas is they don't hunt. They're scavengers and they're not in packs. Well, spotted hyenas do hunt and they are in packs and they don't scavenge. They will, but a lot of people don't realize that the spotted hyena is actually the kings and queens of Africa. And it's also a female dominant group, meaning the males are on the bottom. It's alpha females that run the groups. And hyenas are straight up badass. Excuse my language. I don't like to swear,
Right.
but I don't. Yes. So they really are dominant predators. Okay. And if people were to take those, and we know at this point in time, everyone did like to have impressed royalty, especially back then, and they were taking exotic pets. I mean, even the Romans were, they were putting tigers and lions versus each other. So we have to ask ourselves, because the person that shot that the hunter said it was not a striped hyena, it was a spotted hyena, but it smelled so bad that the carcass had to be buried because they hung it in the town to celebrate, hey, we caught what was going on. But it's just interesting because the hunter is like, no, it was not striped, it was spotted. So this means spotted hyenas were either in Europe and we have just chosen not to acknowledge it, or it was someone's potential exotic pet that escaped. And again, people don't realize how hardy animals are. Africa gets cold. If you were to take a group of hyenas that weren't going to interbreed with each other, that had a healthy species, and you were to let them loose in Arizona, Texas, California, Europe, it's pretty much a very similar temperature in a lot of those spots as to Africa. And now that they're not dealing with dominant predators like leopards and lions, those animals are going to thrive. So if a population has somewhat been brought here or escaped, meaning there was a point in time people owned a ton of exotic cats in the United States and they were given a choice to either get rid of them or that was it. But then a few years later, they said, hey, you have to either euthanize them or put them to a zoo. So before that, though, people were just letting their exotic cats right out into the wild because hey, we can't have you anymore. And I think a lot of that potentially has occurred too because Brian Barber, a good friend of mine, was speaking about one time in a case where he went to an area where a gentleman had a ton of his exotic animals he shouldn't have, and he had this baboon caged up. And Brian said it looked like a crazy looking werewolf, and he said it had the most evil looking yellow eyes, and it had been caged up in this small little area. And he said it was just a maniac. So unfortunately, we know people are holding these type of animals. And I mean, and then in 2006, Jody Cook found the baboon skull in the middle of Ohio. So it makes me wonder, maybe some of these Gugwe slash baboon sightings, werewolf baboons that people are seeing could potentially really be an actual baboon species.
Yeah,
It
very
just
well could be.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would make the most sense because they're not indigenous to, the United States. So why would we be seeing these? So somebody had to have brought them here.
Hmm.
Yeah, because how I always try to approach something is I'm just very scientific based and I try to be super healthy skeptic, meaning I just don't believe everything that's presented to me. I do my own research. I speak to people that know more than me, people I value's opinion more than my own, and I just try to understand things first. And then once things don't fully piece together, that's when, other things need to be looked at, and you need to bring in individuals such as yourself and others that specialize in topics that I don't specialize in. And I don't consider myself a specialist, and I don't consider myself an expert, because anyone in my eyes that thinks they're an expert is just a way to no longer want to learn and close your mind off. You just have such a confidence, you think you know everything, whereas I always want to learn. So I encourage people to correct my information. I encourage people to teach me things, and that's the way even quote unquote an expert should be. So if someone wants to call somebody an expert, that's cool. That's a great kudos. But that expert in terms shouldn't consider themselves an expert, because there's always knowledge out there. And like you had both just said, how did they get here? There was a war for 2 days down in Florida in like the late 1700s. Okay. And this large human-sized baboon was seen stalking the marketplace, stealing fruit, stealing fish, etc. Was seen stalking fishermen. So the soldiers and the villagers is near the Everglades, and they were like, "What the heck? What is this?" And they ended up following it back to its nest area, these old cotton bins on the outskirts of town. They never caught it because it escaped, but yet again, that had to have come from somewhere, and that's in the late 1700s.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I find that this whole Dogman thing, it's very interesting. And I do agree with you what you said. I don't believe there are any experts either, in any field, as far as like, cryptozoology or, aliens, paranormal, any of it, it's just by experiences,
Yeah, I agree 100% with that too.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree. I mean, because things are constantly changing. I mean, you never know what's going on out there. You never know what what environmental changes that these things are going through. I mean, they could appear totally different 20 years from now. I mean, they could look totally different than the reports that we're getting now.
Absolutely.
No, that's beautifully stated by both of you. And a lot of people, again, just don't understand how evolution just works and how animals, can adapt. Just
Mm-hmm.
meaning anything, whether it's a house cat, you would hope no one does it, but how do you think stray cats end up surviving? They've unfortunately either been born outside or were released by people that were terrible owners, etc. Yet they still survive, and they're able to adapt. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand that, just how much animals can adapt, and they will adapt, meaning they're going to do things that are simple. So a lot of times people are like, "Oh wow, these mountain lions or dogmen or bears are coming to our livestock areas and taking our livestock and cattle from us." And it's like, well, yeah, of course, that to them is like us going to the grocery store, meaning instead of chasing down a caribou, why not just go over to this sheep, this goat, this cow that stands there, and you just reach over if you're a dogman or a Sasquatch, or if you're a bear or something, hop over, you take it. People don't understand that. Those animals understand, hey, this is an easy picking. So of course they're going to do that. And unfortunately, I just think sometimes now as a society, we're so distanced from nature that we just ask some of the most ridiculous questions as to why people don't have evidence for this topic. And also, we as a culture just don't understand that animals make noises, whether it's owls or foxes or coyotes. Animals make weird noises. My pet squirrel makes crazy noises. And I think now everyone just, unfortunately, either wants to turn an eye to facts that are presented, or we as a culture just like a good story, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I think some of these theories are blown way out of proportion. I think they're just being exaggerated, and they're not being told by facts. The things that they saw for sure, or they heard for sure. They're just kind of like, when the story gets down the line, I don't think we're hearing exactly what we need to be hearing.
Right.
Well stated again. Well, thank you so much for popping on tonight, because it is really excellent to be able to pick your mind, and both of you have a ton of knowledge when it comes to paranormal and cryptids in general. So it's definitely excellent to sit down and finally catch up. And I do look forward to in the future collaborating again and getting you both back on and really trying to figure out what the heck's going on.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will see you on the next episode of Midnight Lycanthropy.